I feel as though there are many unspoken truths about the anime world that many of us are aware of but don't often talk about due to some sort of stigma surrounding the topic, or even out of fear that we may not fit in with a certain group for having said it. And because of that, we keep it to ourselves. I'm gonna say a few that I believe are true, in my opinion. Despite how long it is, One Piece deserves the popularity it has because of how well it conveys the sheer sense of scale with the world it takes place in, as well as the adventure that's intertwined with its characters that it all culminates in its overarching narrative of freedom and overcoming obstacles no matter how grand they might be. I know One Piece has received its fair share of scrutiny over the years from many anime fans. However, I have to respect its fan base for being as strong as it is resilient, and for their dedication to such a long series. The other thing I wanted to bring up was Berserk, something that hopefully shouldn't need any kind of introduction. This manga series has had a multitude of attempts at an adaptation, each one failing to truly capture the vision that Miyamura had when he originally began the story of Guts. And if you were to ask any Berserk fan if we were to receive a faithful adaptation in the same vein as to what JoJo's Bizarre Adventure received, then Berserk would go down in history as the first piece of Japanese media to not only hold the title of Best Manga, but Best Anime of all time. However, these aren't what I wanted to talk about, because the biggest unspoken truth lately is this. As the years went by, many manga readers believed one mangaka's work would never be able to be adapted because they believed it would be impossible to translate any of his work into any other form other than the original manga. Junji Ito. A horror mangaka whose haunting art style is as recognizable as it is enthralling to look at, due to the sheer level of detail that Junji Ito puts into his work, and it is nothing short of mesmerizing to say the least. And just by showcasing some of these panels in his manga, you can see how differently he sets himself apart from other creators in the horror space. Not only for his art, but for his ideas that always spiral into chaos and insanity for the characters in his stories. Even something as mundane as a next-door neighbor can become a nightmarish hellscape for the readers. And it's because of his art that shifts to these horrific centerpieces that leave such a lasting impression on manga readers as a whole. With such influential projects as Tomie, Gyo, The Enigma of Amigara Fault, and Shiver, which contains probably the only story in his entire catalog that made me gag in real life, and caused me to put the book down after seeing that panel. If you know what I'm talking about, and you somehow didn't get sick to your stomach, you're stronger than me, and I'll admit that right now and shake your hand. For your own good, don't investigate it, especially if you have a weak stomach, but we're getting off track. The new Uzumaki anime finished airing not too long ago, and I have been waiting for all the episodes to be released so I could watch it in full. And in the beginning, I was really excited, but what I got was not what I expected. For the uninformed, or for the people who have been living under a rock for the past 2 decades, Uzumaki is a popular horror manga that centers around not a monster or a serial killer or any other kind of horror trope one would expect from a piece of media in that genre, but rather a pattern, the spiral. Our characters, the trees and grass, even the air, they all circle around the spiral and its curse on Kurozucho. I just wanted to give my opinion on the current discourse surrounding the adaptation. Many saying it was wasted potential, or that Uzumaki sucks, or that the animation is somehow worse than Blue Lock Season 2. And in my opinion, I don't see it that way. Besides, I think Frame Lock still holds the trophy for worst animation by a large margin. Uzumaki has some rough edges for sure, but I'll take some rough edges over actual sliding PNGs for 20 minutes, in my personal opinion. Yes, Uzumaki is not perfect, and I know many people were talking about how the second episode had some of the worst animation they had seen this year, but let me take a few minutes of your time, and maybe I can help you see it from a different perspective. For years now, studios have tried time and time again to adapt Junji Ito's work into some form of watchable media. Gyo, for instance, had its own feature-length film that aired in 2012, complete with CGI sharks, desaturated colors, and worst of all, a boring presentation from beginning to end. Take these 2 images for instance, one from the manga and one from the movie. Junji Ito has stated in the past that he'll spend days, even weeks, on a single piece of his manga until it reaches the exact level of detail he envisioned in his head. Yet when I show you how the same frame in a movie looks like this, you get a distinct lack of passion or even soul in the production as a whole. Corners are cut, art looks shabby and lifeless at times, or even just looks plain bad. Now, before you jump the gun and say how I'm bashing on a movie that is 12 years old, just hear me out. As I previously stated, Junji Ito has had a lot of his work adapted after all. So let's take a look at something a little bit more recent. In 2023 came Junji Ito's Maniac, Japanese Tales of the Macabra. Before Uzumaki, all we had was the Tales of the Macabra, which was distributed by Netflix. This show is basically a compilation of Junji Ito's short stories that were turned into a series. But as we all know with any kind of anthology series, not all episodes are created as equals. So I decided to take it upon myself to look up what are some people's favorite episodes. And the one that I kept seeing pop up more than anything else was Hanging Balloon. Now, due to the fact that I am a scared little pee-pee piss-pants boy, I don't ever usually indulge in horror just because it's not my cup of tea, nor do I want to feel anxious or scared when I'm in the sanctity of my own home. But considering Halloween is right around the corner, I decided to go against my better judgment and dive headfirst without any knowledge whatsoever about this story. Before we talk about the anime, let's look at the manga first. As the story opens up, we see our main girl Kazuko trapped in her room with what looks like tapping on her window. As the story continues, we jump back in time where we see the lifeless body of Terumi Fujino, dead with a rope around her neck. Soon enough, people around town began spreading rumors about how they saw Terumi's ghost floating around town. To them, what looks like a giant floating severed head. It wasn't until Kazuko saw Terumi's head for the first time that she herself realized how true the rumors were. But something no one was prepared for was what happened the following days after Kazuko discovered Terumi. On her way to school, Kazuko looked up to the sky and saw 4 floating shapes descending upon her and her friends. And what they were their own heads. One after another, Kazuko and her friends would meet their untimely demise at the hands, or rather ropes, of these head-shaped balloons. Soon enough, the entire city became plagued with these heads, people getting picked off one by one, with those unlucky enough to find shelter couldn't even leave their houses, because outside would be their head balloon waiting for their moment to strike. Kazuko and her family struggled for days inside their home, not being able to leave, out of fear the balloon might come after them and kill them. But soon enough, all of her family members met their end, whether by sheer stupidity, out of desperation for food, or in her mom's case, just giving up entirely. Eventually, we catch up to the present day where we left off with Kazuko all alone in her room, fighting to ignore the voice outside her window. However, it isn't until she hears the voice of her brother that she finally succumbs and opens the window at last. And I'm sure you know what happens next. I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to make this into a video and YouTube be okay with it. The scenes and themes around the story are very graphic and disturbing, especially when you take into account the deeper meaning behind the story, which is taking your own life. Let's see how the anime handled this story.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that?
You see what I'm talking about now? Something released last year looks like this. And for the most part, most of, if not all of Junji Ito's manga adaptations look drab and lifeless, as if the people behind the production didn't care or simply wanted to push it out regardless of how it compared to the original source material. I know I've only given 2 examples, but there are far more out there that you could use to compare just how wide the gap is between Uzumaki and anything else that's come before it. Uzumaki was so close to being what Junji Ito's work should look like in any kind of adaptation, in my opinion anyways. Now, for all the praise I've given it, I'm not going to pretend I didn't see the issues when I watched it for the first time. Some of the decisions that were made felt questionable, and so many of the scenes were rearranged and out of order or even altered completely. Events happened really quickly, and oftentimes it just felt really cluttered because of it. I can understand why some of the decisions were made. They wanted to include as many of Uzumaki's chapters as possible, but trying to fit all 19 chapters of a manga in just 4 30-minute episodes is a task that is genuinely impossible for anyone to do. Uzumaki's anime is a mess from beginning to end, structure-wise, because of how much they tried to cram into these 4 episodes, and it definitely suffered because of it, but somehow, watching it made me feel some sort of hope, knowing that there are people out there who want a faithful adaptation just as much as I do. This definitely felt like it was taking the steps in the right direction in bringing Junji Ito's art style into an animated format, and having it be done right for once. Even if this execution was lacking in certain areas, it still looked visually amazing. My only wish is that the producers should have given the studio, and especially the animators, just a little bit more time to rough out the areas that needed more polish. Then, maybe we could have had the perfect Uzumaki. But as it stands right now though, I still think this is the best adaptation to date, despite the glaring issues it has. Uzumaki was so close to perfection, but was ruined because of producers' interference. Although, I will take this polished turd over anything else that's come out before it any day of the week. Especially if it's greased! I know this is different from the usual content I've been uploading, but I felt the need to talk about the recent discourse over Uzumaki, given how poorly it's been received, and after I finished it, I just wanted to give my take on it. Please feel free to subscribe if you want more videos like this, I'd really appreciate it, and be sure to tell me what you thought in the comments below. I always love reading your guys' comments, and hopefully some of you agree with me, and if not, I want to hear it. Oh, I almost forgot. And have a happy Halloween.